So in this video, I wanted to talk about pens that are like the Parker Jotter. Usually when we talk about the Jotter, we talk about it as being a full stainless steel pen. That's a stainless steel upper and the stainless steel lower, sometimes known as the Flighter model. But the pen is very, very commonly sold in half stainless, half plastic. And if we were to rewind to the first Jotters, most of the early ones from the first year were sold in a half stainless, half nylon version. So it's not exactly plastic, but the earliest of the Jotters were the sort of half and half pen. And this design, while obviously it's changed over the years, is kind of what I think of as being cloned when I think of the Jotter-like pens we'll be covering. So yeah, just for the record, this is the first year Jotter. You see that nylon lower. It has very distinctive ribbing, and then stainless upper, which we recognize, but different clip, domed button, very distinctive click. It's a really interesting click, really strong return, and obviously kind of a deeper sound. And then we could see it says made in the USA. Here's a much later Jotter, plastic lower, not nylon, stainless steel upper. You see the clip, much different. It has the traditional arrow shape, which we didn't have before. The button, the doming is different, and the click is different. Still good, not quite the same. This design manifested itself in different ways. Here we have a perpetual calendar Jotter, still with the plastic lower. This one had some ads on it, and it has the calendar, which you can turn to match the date of the month and year you're in. Now, here are some pens that I think of are very similar to the Jotter. First up, we have this. This is the Schaefer Sentinel. Now we see plastic lower, stainless upper. Schaefer is known for having a split clip. They use that on a number of pens. And then they have their little dot or ring right here. In many pens, this would be white. Here on the Sentinel, it's not. Much more muted click. Quite nice, though. You see the tip protector, which is common on the Jotter, but wasn't used on the first year. The tip protector is kind of like another one of the hallmarks of this style, with the metal plastic tip protector, obviously retractable. Pretty interesting. This one doesn't use a true Parker style refill. Parkers, as you might expect, use a Parker style refill, also known as an ISO G2 refill. It's a very popular refill design. Schaefer does not use that. They use kind of their own variety of it. And this one, I got a rotring refill. I kind of hacked it to be the Schaefer shape because these refills are not ones that you would commonly find. It's quite close to a Parker style G2, but it's not exactly the same. So you could do it with a rotring or any G2 refill. You put the little Schaefer top piece in here, then you just use a little piece of eraser or something to kind of stop any wiggle. You could see this pen uses this absolutely monster spring. Pens back in the day, 50s, 60s, whatever, used much stronger, much nicer springs. Just, I guess over the years, this was a cost-cutting measure. So again, that's the Schaefer, the Sentinel. Let's see what we have here. Made in the USA, no real details. Dimension-wise, I will use this plastic Jotter as the reference point. You see the sizing is nearly identical, and the dimensions are also, or sort of the ratio is almost identical as well, even down to the taper. The Schaefer is a little stouter in the plastic and thicker here, and it doesn't taper quite as much, which kind of addresses one of the chief complaints with the Jotter, is that the lower is just a little skinny. It can be hard to hold. Next up, we have this pen. Very similar to the Jotter. This one is actually a Bolograph Executive. So it's a Swedish pen. So considerably different. This is a newer model. This pen's been made since I think the 60s or so, but it's a newer model. I just bought this one a couple months ago. And again, very Jotter-like in its appearance. We see stainless upper, similar clip, nice click, but not powerful like the Jotters. Plastic lower, with the tip protector. Opening it up, we see Bolograph has, like Schaefer, has their own take on the Parker style G2. And essentially from here, the metal part is the same. And then Bolograph just has their own little plastic piece. You could pull this out and put in a G2, or you could pull this out and put it in a G2 refill and use it in this pen, depending if you love your Bolograph refills and you want to put it in a G2 pen, you can do that. Or you can get a G2 refill and get it in this. And we see very similar in all of these. We see the plastic lower, but the threading is also plastic. They don't get fancy with it or anything like that. This one has a concave button, a little bit different. Some of the Jotters, let's see if I have one. No, I don't have one here. Had a not quite as deep of a concave button as that, and it wasn't as squared off as this one. But these are just sort of some of the subtle differences. Same here with the top where the clip wraps around the body. There's a nice little ridge here. It looks quite classy. Parker just sort of gets the ring of the clip and kind of pushes it down onto the body. It's a much more simple approach than what Bolograph is doing here. Same effect in the end. As far as the design goes, we'll compare all three and we'll line them up at the middle point. The Jotter is rounder, more like torpedo shaped. The Bolograph is more extended and has a much longer taper towards the front. It's a little hard to pick up on the camera, but we can see here, again, a little hard to do, but longer taper, skinny like the Jotter, not quite as, doesn't have that sort of shoulder the way you see with the Schaefer. So subtle differences. I would say generally the shape of the Schaefer is a little bit more modern feeling, a little bit thicker. Another pen we have in this sort of series of Jotter-like pens is this. This is the Otto, so OHTO, the Japanese pen and pencil brand, and they have a pen called the Raise, R-A-Y-S. Sometimes it's called the Raise Dry Gel, but that's just because it uses a gel refill. It is a Parker style refill. It just happens to be in this plastic body, has a needle tip. It's a gel refill, so it's kind of an oddity, especially in an otherwise very retro pen body. You know, as a pen body, it's essentially from the late 50s, and to see it with a needle tip refill is pretty interesting. This pen is on the affordable side. Online, you could find it for like $6-7. In person, I got this one for $3.50, so definitely affordable considering all the nice features to it. You see the tip protector, longer front, more of a taper here. Gets very skinny at the end. Much lighter click. Doesn't have that sort of really firm Jotter feel to it, and much quieter. Kind of a more complex clip. Kind of some 3D action going on there, which looks quite nice. This one was looked a little bit off center to me, which is kind of annoying, but you can adjust it. It's just kind of flimsy. And then up here, you see the clip doesn't have that full ring around it. It's just a stamped piece of metal. It gets pushed in here. And then when this piece gets pressed in or screwed in or whatever, the clip kind of just sits there. So that's why it's so prone to moving. You see the Jotter, the clip, much wider here, and it's attached to this piece. So has a lot more steady of a design. Again, for reference, we'll match on that middle, and the Raise is a much longer pen, or almost half-inch longer, I guess, and then longer body and skinnier at the bottom. So very different profile. Last pen in this series, and this is sort of cheating because it's not a button retractable. This one is the Fischer Capomatic. So this one is different because the button is the entire top. But this is another pen. I think this one's from the 60s. So long-standing design. Doesn't use a Parker style refill. It uses the Fischer PR4, which is their standard refill. This can be adapted to be Parker style with a little piece of plastic that comes on the top. So it's sort of a Parker style. This one's pressurized, so it writes in any direction. You can see that sort of kind of low rent plastic bottom again with the tip protector. And again, this one has a design where the whole top is the button and this slides. Some people wonder if you could pinch yourself here. The answer is not really. And again, it's a really clean design. You're missing the traditional button, but it still in effect has a button. So I really like this Capomatic. It's one of my preferred plastic and half and half pens, and just a very reliable one, which has that pressurized refill. Comparing it to the Jotter, we see obviously this one uses a chromed, obviously again missing the button, and you have a really nice clip here. So space pen made in the USA, and you have some of those traditional Fischer markings here. Again, large space pen, and then the Fischer logo in its italicized form, which is how you most commonly see it. It looks cool and space age or whatever. Yeah, so that pretty much covers it. I think I wasn't trying to pick a best here or anything like that. It's just kind of pointing out an interesting phenomenon where you can buy similar pens from different companies that all have sort of a take on a common theme, which is that more affordable version of a full stainless steel pen, which is half plastic, half stainless. Also, you get a lighter pen, which some people like. It is always, because of the placement of that stainless or that placement of that metal, it's going to be a little top heavy, which some people like, some people don't like. I like the balance of a full stainless steel Parker Jotter more than I do the half and half one, but it's still a very good pen. I've spent a lot of time using this one in particular, but these Jotters in all forms. So I think they're pretty cool. Obviously, the king of the bunch is the first year Jotter, which is hard to find, but it is still a kind of notable piece in pen history. And if you could track one of these down, it's a lot of fun. I don't necessarily I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, but it's cool to use one once if you get a chance. You can get the full effect, or most of the full effect, by going with a modern Jotter, or even the full stainless steel Jotter will let you have a feel about what's going on here. And then I just wanted to wrap up the video with a quick writing sample. This is not always going to be completely accurate, just because some of these Jotters are 40 and 50-year-old pens. So the original refills are not going to be there. But I do have a classic Jotter refill, so one that's maybe 10 plus years old. Here's a new Ottoso Raise refill, the Schaefer Sentinel refill, which is 10 plus years old, hard to say. Relatively new Fischer Capomatic refill, so that's the Fischer PR4, and then a nearly brand new Bolograph Executive refill. So I would just say, like, from a writing perspective, you can kind of ignore the Jotter, because if you buy a new one, you'll have a relatively new Jotter refill. You get a darker kind of refill like this Schaefer Sentinel, and or maybe even like the Bolograph. So kind of like a modern ballpoint. You won't get something really dark and saturated like the Ottoso Raise, where you're getting a new gel refill. Of these refills, I actually prefer the Fischer PR4. It's relatively smooth. It's not super smooth. Obviously, it is a relatively traditional ballpoint, but it is very reliable. It's smooth enough, has nice dark ink, darker than any of the others, and it is pretty fun to write with. It kind of like has some grip to it, has like a bit of a personality, where the traditional Jotter refill, it doesn't have a lot of personality in it, but it does work fine. The Schaefer Sentinel refill is on the way out, and Bolograph refills are, for me, they're just kind of too thick and old feeling. So Fischer has a little bit more glide to it, but it still writes really nicely and writes just about anywhere. Plus, because it's pressurized, it'll write upside down, underwater, and all that. So just from writing experience, for me, out of the whole bunch, the Capomatic or the Fischer space pens are the best writers. Again, the gel pen from the Ottos is definitely good if you're writing only on paper, but if you're going with one of these pens, you probably want something a little bit more versatile. So I'd go with the Fischer.